Hey y'all, I'm back today to talk a little bit about sunlight. This video was requested, and I've mentioned this before, how important it is to go outside, and there's so many reasons for that. But today I want to focus on the sunlight in general. Now, if we think back to our ancestors who would have spent most of their time outside, and most of their outdoor time would not have happened, through windows. Like, think about when you're in a car and we have all these windows, and now windows block certain aspects of the light spectrum, so we're not getting full spectrum light when we're getting light through windows. Many of us also wear sunglasses or just regular glasses, and those also are filtering out the light. And many people also slather in sunscreen every time they go outside. And I'm going to kind of deep dive into what we're missing when we aren't going outside with bare eyes and bare skin. Now, I'm not saying go out for 8 hours and get a sunburn, obviously, but we'll get into the nuances of that as well. So let's start by understanding, like, the field of science that I'm talking about is called circadian biology. And I am not a circadian biologist, and I'm not an expert in this field by any means, but I have done a ton of research, and I've also been applying it to my own life to address certain health issues, and I've found a lot of benefit by doing this. So I'm going to share what I know, and I encourage you to seek out the people and the folks who are really, really extremely nuanced and well versed in this field, so that you can get more information, more in-depth information. And right now, if you're the kind of person who likes to see the clinical trials, there are many clinical trials going on right now that have to do with circadian biology. So that research is available, and some of those results are available as well if you're curious in deep diving. And so what is circadian biology? Let's start with that. Circadian biology is the study of biological rhythms that follow the 24-hour cycle. And these are influenced by environmental cues, and today we're especially going to talk about light. So sunlight is what regulates our internal clock. We actually have a structure in our brain called the suprachiasmatic nuclei. It's a paired structure, and it is the body's master clock. It is taking in the information about what time it is, and it is sending that information to every cell in our body. So every single cell has a way to keep time, and our cells need to know what time it is, because different things are produced and released at different times of the day based on what we need to be doing in our life process. So the brain isn't the only way that we take in, the brain is the way that we start to regulate our time, but how do those signals get to the brain? It's through something called photoreceptors. So we have photoreceptors in our eyes, and we have photoreceptors in our skin. These actually, they detect the light, and then they're what sends the signals to our brain's master clock. So this actually contributes to controlling our own biological rhythm. So when we have applied sunscreens, when we're wearing glasses, our photoreceptors cannot receive the light signaling from the sun, and therefore we're not getting the proper messages to our brain, which is then not signaling the rest of our body properly to produce and release neurotransmitters and hormones. So when we talk about some of the hormones, I would say that cortisol is the one most people are most familiar with. That is the stress hormone. And naturally, cortisol should peak in the morning. That's what makes us wake up and have the energy to start the day. And when people have intact circadian rhythms, cortisol is higher in the morning. Now, you might have experienced it yourself or known people where somehow the rhythms get switched and it's really, really hard for them to get going in the morning, but then they have a cortisol peak at night, right? And so this is definitely a bit of an imbalance where there's mixed signaling And instead of having higher cortisol in the morning, we can end up having higher cortisol later in the day, which we don't want to happen because it can impact our rhythms. The other one is melatonin, and as you all know, we need this for sleep. So actual light at sunrise is what tells our bodies to start producing melatonin subcellularly. So if we aren't getting exposed to the spectrum of light at sunrise, we might miss the signal that we're supposed to start producing our melatonin. Now, that doesn't mean that it's being released, right? Because we don't want to go back to sleep in the morning. But as we produce melatonin throughout the day, then when our signals tell our brain, okay, it's time to release melatonin, now we have enough to release. So if we're missing that signaling, then we might be missing out on some of our melatonin production. And, the sunlight likewise impacts reproductive hormones. And so we're not going to get into the itty bitty details of this because that's a very detailed topic, but anyone who is having hormonal imbalances, issues with thyroid, reproductive issues, women in perimenopause and menopause, all of these things are about hormones and hormonal balance, and they are things that sunlight can actually help to regulate. There are clinical trials on all of the things I mentioned above, again, if you're interested. But let's talk a little bit about neurotransmitters. So our brain chemicals, which are involved in this circadian biology. First of all, there's dopamine, right? Dopamine is what makes us feel feelings of motivation and pleasure. And light exposure is actually proven to boost dopamine production. Again, that's like morning sunlight. So if we're missing out on that, our brains might not be producing enough dopamine to help our mental health stay on track. Now, there are lots of other neurotransmitters that are involved in this, and some of those include serotonin and GABA. So when we're talking about mental health in general, anxiety, depression, even our ability to maintain a mood, right? Just be in a decent mood. We're really going to have to think through what's happening in our bodies with the sunlight. So serotonin is related with mood elevation as well. And so again, all of these things, if we're just getting outside during sunrise, then all the signals are happening that say, hey, start producing this. Start producing cortisol at the right time. Please, produce and balance my reproductive hormones. Start producing the right neurotransmitters so that my mental health can be in balance. And when, we live in this modern society, we are, first of all, we're waking up and we're immediately staring at our cell phone. And so if you look at the natural spectrum of light, so think about how light changes throughout the day and also throughout the seasons of the year. And you can tell that like at sunrise, the spectrum of light is different than it is like at solar noon, which is different again from what it is in the afternoon and then sunset. So what our screens are mimicking is very high in blue light. And on the spectrum of light, blue light is the most intense, and blue light in our brain is associated with midday and is associated with summer. Our phones are so bright that they can actually mimic what the light would be like in the middle of summer, in the middle of the day. And so if we are waking up and the first light we're exposing our eyes to tells our brains, hey, it's midsummer in the middle of the day, then our brains and bodies are going to release and adjust hormones and neurotransmitters to tell us that's what it is. But if we are, at sunrise in autumn, that is not what we need, and that's immediately going to create an imbalance. And so there are a few simple tips to start bringing your circadian biology back in line. I personally have been working with these tips and I have seen massive improvements. I started doing this regularly about 7 to 8 months ago. And I've talked to people personally who have healed so many issues with simply sunlight and doing these practices, from anxiety issues to sleep issues to imbalanced thyroid, and even starting to help manage diabetes through tending to our circadian biology. So here are some of the simple tips, and then I encourage you to dig deeper into this based on whatever you're trying to address in your own health. So, okay, when you wake up in the morning, you want to look at what time the sun rises, and you want to get yourself outside for about 10 minutes right around sunrise. So before you go outside, don't turn on overhead lights, and definitely don't look at your phone screen or at your computer screen or turn on a TV. If you need to look at your phone, there are ways to put your phone in red light mode, and you can research that based on your phone's model. You know, if you use the alarm on your phone or something like that. But get yourself outside. If you wear glasses, just lower them down. You want your bare eyes and you want your bare skin exposed. So if you can, you know, short sleeves or whatever amount of skin you can expose to the light. And you don't have to be able to see the sun. You don't have to stare at the sun. What you want is the light spectrum that is diffuse in the whole outdoors when you walk outside. Now, if it is raining or if it's too cold, you can do this through an open window as long as it's not through glass. So like through a screen of a window, and you can sit in front of that for about 10 minutes. Okay, after that point, you want to try to eat breakfast within an hour of that. That's going to really, really help with your insulin levels. And definitely don't drink coffee before you eat. So that's also going to help with cortisol. Now, as you're going through the day, you know, if you do have to stare at a computer all day, you could consider getting blue light blocking lenses, but definitely take some outdoor breaks. Just go outside, let your bare eyes absorb the light. Now, after sunset, and this gets harder because we just had time change. So now the sun's setting at like 4:40. So this gets a little bit harder, but when possible, start to mitigate screens at least 3 hours before you want to go to sleep. So you can do that a number of ways. You can find other things to do besides for watching TV or staring at your phone. You can listen to audiobooks, listen to podcasts. You can read a book. You want to get a no blue light book light. You want to turn off your overhead lights. You can have lamps on. Try to get like yellow colored bulbs that aren't bright white lights. You can light candles. You can talk to your family, play games, right? But about 3 hours before you actually want to go to sleep, if you start to tend to your light environment, that's what's going to trigger your brain to release the melatonin that it produced all day. This is going to contribute to much deeper and better, more fulfilling sleep. And it's also just going to help your body get readjusted to following day and night rhythms. So I hope that that's helpful and that explains it a little bit more. If there are questions or if there's anything you want me to deep dive into, I will do that if I feel like I know enough to do it, and if not, I'll tell you where to find it. But leave it in the comments for me, and I hope you now understand why sunlight is so important.